All right. We're getting started here. KBO Chat live, coming to you live, of course. What other way here? Sam Pascal alongside Eric Halterman. Thank you for being flexible with us as we are now on our Tuesday day. We'll see how long that lasts, but most likely just Monday and Thursday today. Tuesday, a little flexible there. But I kind of like because we get a chance to reflect on some matchups at the beginning, game ones of the series. Normally we have to wait for the full 3 games. Now we can see a little bit how the power rankings turned out a little bit. So I'm looking forward to it. Eric, how you doing on this fine KBO Tuesday?
Yeah, doing pretty well. Hoping that my power rankings and all that didn't get completely blown up by one single day. I don't think they should, but it's an exciting week. A lot of good matchups. So
Yeah, should be great. Comments are already coming in, guys. Looking forward to a great show. And again, this is for you, the fans. We want to answer your questions. If you're wondering about park factors, Preston Tucker, one of my favorite guys, talking about him. DFS lines, we'll get your picks. We got the expert here, Eric. He knows it all. We're going to break it down. So let's dive right in. Frankie, Kevin, Barry, thank you. Let's dive in here. So moving up to the screen here, we got our power rankings starting the brand new week 11 power rankings. Top 3 NC Dinos, Key Room Heroes, Deuce and Bears. Anything notable here? This looks like the standard kind of 1, 2, 3 from last week, but I guess you would pretty much expect that, especially as we are, full 50+ games in here already.
yeah, it's those three have definitely separated themselves by a bit. It was a top 4 for a while with the Twins as part of that group, but they've really fallen off, as I'm sure we'll get to in a bit. Dino's pretty comfortable. 5 or so game lead at the top of the standings right now. I could definitely see either the Bears or Heroes catching them with a hot streak. Heroes could do some work in that regard right now. They've already taken the first game of 3 against the Dinos, and they've got a very nice matchup tonight, as we'll get to later, with Eric Jokic on the mound. So they've got a chance. The Bears have a chance. But one of the more interesting stats I found while doing this piece was what you'll see right there on the Bears. They've gone 17-6 when one of their top 2 starters, Raul Alcantara and Chris Flexen, are on the hill. And they're now 17-19 after losing last game when anyone else is starting. So really, they're 2 totally different teams, it seems like. We've talked for a while about how they're very much a hitting-heavy team. That's not true when they got one of their top 2 starters. Then they're a very balanced team because those guys are both quite good. But when anyone else is out there, they've been a real adventure, and they don't have much of a bullpen either. So it's basically 2 entirely different teams, depending on who's on the mound for those guys.
Yeah, I'm writing the word pitching here because that seems to be the difference maker for this Bears team if they can make that next step. Taking a look at some of the great tools we have here on rotowire.com, of course, projecting the starters for the rest of the series, looking up that we have both these guys you're mentioning, both Alcantara and Flexen, coming up very soon. Alcantara going tonight. Are we confident this Bears team staying balanced through the rest of this series and into the second half of the week?
Yeah, I mean, you got to favor them pretty heavily in these 2 games with them going against the Wyverns with their 2 best starters. But anytime you get one of their back-end starters, their back 3, they really haven't found anybody particularly trustworthy. Jong Lee Park had a couple of these starts, not much of a track record yet. So anytime you see one of the other 3, I think it's safe to treat them as something close to a 500 team. A lot like the Wiz have been all year in that they're very offense-heavy without much pitching. When it's not one of those 2 guys going, the Bears are basically the Wiz.
I like that. I like that, the Wiz comparison. We're already getting some comments here from Sean about the Wiz, which we will get to, Sean. Do not worry. But I did want to go back to this Key Boom team, mentioning that they are just above the Bears at the number 2 spot this week. Barry here is wondering about what if they take the series this week? Is this bullpen maybe enough? Brigham and Russell, some 2 really interesting international guys on this team, and making a really great team probably even a little greater. What are our thoughts here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the fact that they've been this good with only 1 foreign player out of the 3 that they're allowed to have, that's huge. The fact that they're right up there at the top, I would absolutely think with Brigham back, we saw how good he looked in just 5 innings. He handled the Dinos pretty easily, just allowing 1 run last night in his first start back from a elbow issue that kept him out for 6 weeks, 2 months, however long it was. So definitely think with those 2 guys, that should come pretty close to closing the talent gap between those 2. And you got to figure bullpens should matter in the playoffs. Although with the Dinos getting to skip their 5th starter spot, which has been a real adventure this year, the top of the Dinos rotation is as good as anybody's, so that helps them in the playoffs too. But if it does come down to Kiwoom versus NC in the Korea series, I think we're in for a great matchup.
And I think with a lot of that would be like, who is going to be hotter? I think with the KBO, a lot of people might not know if they're just joining, that team that gets that 1 seed, which most likely is going to be NC or Kiwoom, has a long time, a couple buys, all the buys, right to the Korean series, their World Series. And we know this Kiwoom team to be kind of streaky. How have they done so far now 2 weeks into July? Do they have enough steam to kind of keep going and close the gap on the Dinos? Or is the Dinos pretty much locked up that 1 seed?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think they're extremely hot streak, falling off just a little bit, but you can't stay as hot as they were forever. But again, getting Brigham and Russell coming in should offset the fact that they've slowed down. I mean, they had that poor stretch there against the Tigers. So that definitely threw their momentum off for a bit. But you can't expect them to stay like the hottest team in baseball for the entire year. So I wouldn't be too worried that they're slowing down a bit, and we'll just have to see how much those two can send them back. Because when they're on, they've been the best team in the league for stretches, for sure. For most of June, I think they were playing better than the Dinos.
I like that. We see here 2 different stretches here with our great RotoWire team tool here, looking at everything these teams have to offer. So moving down the line here, now to a number 4 team, the KT Wiz, the Kia Tigers, and the Samsung Lions. I am surprised here, Eric. KT jumping all the way to the number 4 spot. Sean saying KT and Tigers, they're good. But the KT Wiz, are they this good? Only 3 games above 500, but they're in your 4th spot this week. Explain.
Yeah, I mean, spots 4 through 7. It's the Wiz, Tigers, Lions, and Twins. They're all quite close in terms of record, quite close in terms of a lot of things. So I gave the Wiz the edge here as they've been playing the hottest of the group. They've gone 11-3 over their last 14 games now. And I'd definitely be more scared of facing the Wiz than any of those 3 with the way they're playing. Again, since these are RotoWire power rankings, I'm trying to make them most useful for fantasy players. So a big part of that is how scared should you be to have a pitcher or a hitter facing this team right now? And I think the Wiz, you have to say, are scarier than those other 3 with the way they've been playing lately, especially their pitching. The pitching was a huge problem early, but they've given up, it's now 4.5 runs over their last 14 games, which again is that stretch they've gone 11-3. Only giving up 4.5 runs over that stretch, which would be good for top, I think, 2nd in the league if they had maintained that over the whole season. So if they can pitch, again, that's over a full run better than they've been over the course of the year. So I don't expect that to stay that good. But we see how well they can play when they've got the pitching to complement their hitting. Because their hitting, I mean, you don't need much more than Mel Rojas, but they have more than Mel Rojas. They have Baek-ho Gong, who's one of the best young Korean hitters. They've got Jae-gun Hwang, who was briefly a San Francisco Giant. He's extremely hot right now. They're just playing really well on both sides of the ball. So I think they have to move up to 4th if you're talking about how scary are they right now, even if they're still a little bit lower than that in the standings.
And a big thing with these standings is that power of the former major leaguers, former pro guys, and like you said, pretty much 2 guys in this lineup, pretty much 3 when you count Baek-ho Gong. There, Sean asking about international players restrictions. This maybe applies more for a team like Doosan or a team like Hanwha, but Kiwoom and Doosan, these are 2 teams that the Wiz are trying to catch up to. Do they have enough international firepower to make up for that pitching, to actually make that gain on the great teams? Because if they haven't done it by now, I'm starting to think they might not ever do it.
Well, they're mostly making up for some really bad baseball early. In terms of their international players, I mean, Mel Rojas is the best hitter in the league, so no complaints there. On the pitching side, Odrasamar Despaigne has been very up and down, but he's back on and up. So you're getting what you want out of him. William Cuevas, as their other international pitcher, hasn't been elite, but I think he's been good enough. They wouldn't mind somebody slightly better, but There aren't a ton of trades in the KBO on the topic of trades. I think Daniel Kim talked about it on an ESPN broadcast a few weeks ago. You have to consider that all 10 teams play in one division. So any trade you're making, you're helping out your direct competitors. There's no chance of sending a guy from the AL to the NL or sending a guy to a different division. Obviously, we do see trades within the division in MLB sometimes, but it has to be from one team that really knows they're not competing to another that is, just because there's no real interest in a mutually beneficial trade between two teams that are fighting for the same spot. And in the KBO, everybody fights for the same spot. So I would expect to see a lot fewer trades than you're used to if you follow American sports leagues primarily. Not to say that there's none. There's been a handful already, but it's mostly been like a team giving up, their second bench infielder to another team that has no third baseman, or a team that's already out of it dealing some pitching depth, that kind of deal. I wouldn't expect a big move, like Sean was talking about. In theory, somebody like the Eagles could think we're not going to have Warwick Soppold for long, so might as well deal him. But in general, I wouldn't expect to see big trades.
Along those same lines, Kiwoom, going just back to them just for a second, they don't really need to make any moves, but could they? Kevin asking here about them trading for a pitcher. This one doesn't seem to really make sense because they have Brigham coming back, but do you see them making any flexibility if there was, an injury to Brigham again? How much of a leash do they really want to have with him when they're in such a crucial playoff spot?
Right. The back of their rotation is pretty weak. Brigham and Eric Jokic Jokic has been possibly the best pitcher in the league, or right up there with Chang Mo Koo as 1 and 2. And Brigham was supposed to be better than him coming into the year. So that's as close to as good a 1-2 as you're going to get if Brigham's who he's supposed to be. And Won-tae Choi, their top Korean pitcher, is good enough for a number 3. But one of the reasons we've had to see so much of their bullpen is they just have had to mix and match and go with a bunch of basically bullpen games for those last 2 spots. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bad team's third starter that can become Kiwoom's 4th or 5th. That would be the kind of move that would make some sense. Unless they've got young guys in the Futures League that I'm not really aware of that they might call on instead. But I think I would expect them to churn a bit at the back of that rotation.
In case you're just tuning in now, this is KBO Chats Live. Sam Pasco, Eric Holtzman, breaking down everything in tonight's KBO slate. And right now we're looking at some power rankings. So continuing on the Wiz, just being the top of this kind of 4 through 7 group you mentioned, they are indeed quite scary against left-handed pitching. You can see that here. You can sort by versus lefties. 13 and 4. Wow. Next closest Dinos, of course. But, look at the rankings here. They're number 1, the Dinos, but the Wiz number 7. Is this maybe surprising, or is this maybe something we shouldn't care about? How many lefties do we see the Wiz really facing maybe down the stretch? Is this enough to make a difference? Because versus righties, they have a losing record.
That's interesting. I'm not sure the sample size on either of those is enough to matter a ton. And it's actually somewhat surprising because, Mel Rojas is a switch hitter. He's actually apparently the only switch hitter in the league, which definitely surprised me. I hadn't noticed any others, but I would have thought thered be more. But
you have to think, right?
I haven't seen another one, so it seems to be true. So he obviously can hit both. But you'd think with Baekho Gong being a lefty and being so good that would hurt them against lefties, but it hasn't so far. I'm not sure I'd place too much stock in that yet, but it's something to consider at least. You look at some of these, like the Doosan Bears, they're very heavily left-handed, yet they're got no problems against lefties. So some of these you'd have to think might be small sample issues, but that does at most I would consider it just a small amount. I think I would look more at is their talent right-handed versus left-handed, and I would assume that a record over 17-ish games is likely to have a decent amount of randomness in it. But
I think that's insane that Rojas is the only switch hitter in the league. That is just bonkers right there. But hey, they're number 4 right now in the power rankings. They'll take it, and hopefully they have some more, right-handed talent that can maybe make up for the righties to get on right. So moving now to Tigers, Lions. Now going number 7, LG Twins, Lotte Giants, SK Wyverns, and we'll lump in the Hanwha Eagles, who aren't embarrassing themselves that much, maybe. I don't even know what to say about them. But from this bottom group, are we looking at anything interesting here? The Twins, they've fallen quite a bit and don't seem to really be doing much about it.
Yeah, there's a couple of very uninspiring stats about the Twins. They're now 5-15-1 over their last 21 games. They're winning less than a quarter of them. They can't beat good teams. If you see right there, their record against the top three teams, just 6 wins out of, is that 22 games? That's the top three. That's the Dinos, Heroes, and Bears. The only reason they have a good record is they're beating up on the bad teams. I was looking into the other day the top 7 teams' records against the top 7. I sent out a tweet about that because I just found it interesting. The Twins were 7th there. They're just really struggling against the other good teams, whereas the Wiz actually are 4th, even though they're down in 7th in the standings. They've actually hung with the good teams very well. For some reason, the Lotte Giants have their number this year. I'm not sure if that's the kind of thing I'd expect to continue at all. But it seems like the Twins just have problems against good teams.
That is a conundrum because beginning of this year, they were looking like the Kiwoom of now, where they were going to be that number 2, number 3 team competing right with the Dinos. How much has Roberto Ramos kind of faded and been a part of this demise of this once powerful Twins team? Is he the main factor in that they can't produce any offense against good teams, or is it bad all around?
He's definitely a factor in their slump. I mean, the slump coincides pretty well, I think, with his brief injury. He was out with ankle and back issues was it late mid-June or so. And he was bad when he came back. And that was definitely linked to their slump. Hyun-Soo Kim was slumping at the same time. Both of those guys are starting to wake up, but the record really hasn't turned it around yet. So I think they need a bunch of help across the board. They do still have the top end talent, but it's just not working out right now.
Yeah, not looking good for the number 7 team on our power rankings here. But one team that we were looking pretty optimistic on this time last week was the Samsung Lions. Just one above now. They were as high as 4 last week. Sean here talking about them maybe overperforming. We did look at that batting average on balls in play. Maybe they were a little lucky. Tyler Saladino is fine, but maybe not quite enough to propel a team into the playoff race. How do we feel about this Lions team going forward?
Right. I think that's a good point about the defense. I think Jong Lee, their shortstop, has a good defensive reputation. I don't know a ton about individual defensive stats since it's not particularly fantasy relevant on an individual level. So I can't say I've done a ton of looking into it, but that sort of thing, it's absolutely what you need if you're going to reliably outperform your peripherals, which all of the Lions are doing. It does seem as though they have some good defenders, so there's reason to buy into it a bit. But the extent to which they've been outperforming, like all of their starters have ERAs way better than their FIPS. At least they did last I checked. And that's not the kind of thing you'd expect to keep going by at least the same margin that it has been so far. So I think it's something that I'd be interested in looking into a bit more. I know Jong Lee has a good reputation. I'm not sure about the rest of them. It's definitely the kind of thing that would explain it, but I'm not sure to the extent just yet. That would take a bit more research than I've had reason to do as somebody who mostly focuses on the fantasy side of things.
Yeah, just talking about this bullpen, how much do you see that being a factor? Because, overall, I mean, maybe that's the peripherals, outperforming the peripherals talking here. This looks like maybe a decent unit, a middle of the pack unit that could sneak in. But late in games, are we worried about this team?
Well, they do have a decent pen, and that's another thing that can make you outperform some of your team-wide numbers. I think teams with good bullpens are a little bit more likely to win close games because if they're up by one run, they keep being up by one run, and whereas bad teams are much more likely to blow it. So it's the kind of thing that could help them outperform their numbers, and it's part of the reason why they went on that charge. Again, the top-end talent isn't a ton. On offense, it's mostly Tyler Saladino and Jae-Wook. Sung-Soo Kim, their leadoff hitter, is pretty good too, but it's not the core that most of the playoff teams have. So I'm still thinking that they'll fade, but defense and bullpen is the kind of thing that makes you outperform your top-end offensive talent for sure.
Yes, Saladino, he's fine, but, we'll see how long that performance is sustainable in the KBO, because maybe he's a little injury prone now, just coming back from an absence, as you're noting here. In the power rankings, in case you're just tuning in, this is KBO Chats Live. We are answering your questions about the KBO, breaking down some power rankings, the lineups for tonight, all that great stuff and more. So you're talking about the Lions here. Scrolling back down, of course, we run into the Twins. We were talking about Ramos. There's anyone else there that's maybe interesting from a fantasy perspective if Ramos is struggling and maybe gets lowered in the lineup? Is there someone there that could step up that you could see maybe, get some more production, some more at-bats because he's a little lower?
Well, I think they're going to stick with him in the cleanup spot, and he is starting to come alive again. But they do have a few more guys. I mean, Hyun-Soo Kim, former major leaguer, he's a great contact hitter. Somebody who's always interesting, left-handed bat, who's now hitting second because of Jong Lee, or maybe he was always second. They inserted Jong Lee in between Kim and Ramos. He's a guy who was out for all of the year, just came back over the weekend. He's the guy I highlighted here, as you can see on the screen. Not a star, but he was a guy with about a 840 OPS 2 years ago and about 800 last year, even when they dejuiced the ball. So a solidly above average hitter. Just adds depth to the middle of the lineup. They've inserted him in the number 3 spot, which indicates how highly they think about him. Again, not an elite bat, but with their 2 best hitters being left-handed, it's nice that they have another decent righty. Also, from fantasy perspective, if the Twins are facing a particularly bad lefty, it's nice to have another righty in there you can trust. So getting him back should help at least a bit, but they might need more than just one guy if they're really going to be making a charge up the standings.
California Wager here says, cheers, happy Tuesday. Yes, happy Tuesday to you as well. As we continue down the power rankings here, see what's going on. And see the Lotte Giants. Dan Straley seems to be the captain of, how do I put this, disappointingly good starts, where he just goes out there, does a great job, finally got a second win. But, I mean, for what this guy's been doing for this team, he should almost be at double-digit wins. I mean, he's that good of a pitcher, but yet it's not enough for them to be a winning team. Sitting 8th again this week. Could they trade him? I mean, we're getting a lot of trade questions here. Now, that sounds kind of insane, but, I mean, those numbers are insane. I can't believe any playoff team wouldn't want to go get this guy from this losing team.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a lot of precedent for trading a star at the deadline, but certainly if that's the kind of thing that would happen, this is a situation where it could make some sense. I wouldn't expect to see it, though. But yeah, he's been amazing. He's basically, I think it was 2018 Jacob deGrom when he won his first Cy Young, despite winning something like 10 games. It's basically that kind of guy where he just goes out and does everything you ask every time, and it just doesn't work out that well. So, well, works out for him, but he doesn't end up with a win anyway. They just don't have a lot. I should look up their numbers when he's on the mound versus not, but they just don't have enough around him. But again, this is the team that finished last in the league by quite a lot. They were like 10 games worse than the Eagles last year. So the mere fact that they're competitive in the standings is definitely a sign that they're going in the right direction. I don't think we should expect much more than this, and I don't think they expected much more than this. I think they're very much still in rebuild mode, just having a better record a year or two earlier than they expected.
I think that's fair. I mean, it is baseball. It's not where, for football or basketball, where one guy can come in and basically turn around a franchise. Even though Straley is at that, I dare say, Brady LeBron level in the KBO here, but you're right. They should be happy just being at number 8 and not being at the bottom, because right now at the bottom we have some disappointing teams: the Wyverns and the Eagles. Is it a 9A, or is it 10A here? How do we feel about these two teams? Because they did play not that long ago. How much of a difference here is between the 9 and 10 slot in our KBO power rankings?
I think with the way they're playing right now, it's pretty small. I mean, the Eagles did take 2 or 3 from the Wyverns, so you could even make a case that they could move above them. On the season as a whole, the Eagles have been way worse. They're last in more or less everything. I think both their triple slash on offense and defense, as I noted there, they're last in every single stat. Last in average on base slugging and last in average on base and slugging allowed. So they're they're just not close to competitive. So I think I'm still more scared of facing the Wyverns, but not much at all.
Hey, they are 8th in walk percentage, though. Hey, I mean that.
True.
I can't even make it sound good. This team is just horrible all around. Continue with that trade gossip. Is there any chance they trade? I guess Bell's not good enough to be traded. But to trade Sappold, I mean, he could maybe help someone out. Is that a possibility or no?
Yeah, again, not sure if there's a ton of precedent. It could make some sense. Sappold's probably better than some of the good teams' second guy. But although I'm not a huge Sappold fan, he just doesn't strike people out. Doesn't give up a ton of runs, but when balls find the gaps, his ERA rises, and his ERA is now not very good because balls have found the gaps for a couple starts. So I don't think good teams will be even all that interested in him. There was a mention of Sungwon Moon of the Wyverns. He would be the kind of guy who could move. I think he's 30 years old and having a very strong year. And again, because he's Korean, there's not a limit. You wouldn't have to do fancy roster maneuvering to fit him in. So I have no idea if he's on the block, but he's definitely the kind of guy that would be, I would think. Although, again, since the Wyverns fell from 1st to 9th this quickly, maybe they'll keep guys thinking that they'll get right back up to 5th next year. So
we'll have to see. So, yeah, like you said, not an international player that maybe a team would have to worry about that roster, that 3 roster spot flexibility type thing. So we'll have to see. Again, here on rotowire.com, we got all our great team stats. Eagles, you can clearly see, definitely not what they hope to be this season. But now we dive in to some not probable pitching stars, but today's probable lineups. Daily lineups here. We're seeing some series up. Got new banners on the side here, zooming in. Where shall we start? We're seeing here Connor mentioning Kia against the Lions. Lions and Tigers, oh my. Your boy, Drew Gagnon, he's on the bump. Eric, how do we feel about him tonight against the Lions team that, maybe has been a little lucky?
Yeah, I've been a big Drew Gagnon fan, mentioned him several times, but he has not been at his best lately. I actually didn't recommend him on the cheat sheet tonight. I expected to, but this series is in the most hitter-friendly park in the league, Daegu Samsung Lions Park. Which, by the way, I love how many of the parks are named over there. There's no question about who plays at Daegu Samsung Lions Park. Big fan of that. Most hitter-friendly park in the league. Though I mean, the Tigers did just get shut out there yesterday, so it's certainly possible. It's not Coors Field by any means, but he hasn't been in his best. His last 4 starts, he has a 4.64 ERA and a 1.73 WHIP. And strikeouts and walks, which were the main thing I loved about him early, those haven't been too impressive either. 16 strikeouts, 11 walks over his last 4. So he's been decidedly mediocre. So I wouldn't completely avoid Lions hitters against him, even though I've generally been a fan. Given the park, I think you could definitely play some of their best guys. Jawook Koo is back. He had a minor injury. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was a minor thumb injury. So with him and Saladino, they're playable tonight, even though I'm a fan of Gagnon. And I'd be a fan of Tigers hitters too against Jung Hyun Baek for the Lions. He's got fine strikeout and walk numbers, but he gives up a ton of homers. He's tied for the most homers allowed in the league, which explains why his ERA is pretty mediocre. He is a lefty, which means I'm not sure I'd go with Preston Tucker and Hyung-Woo Choi, who I normally pick on the Tigers. I put Ji-Won Na, their cleanup hitter, on my cheat sheet this time. Not quite the same level of bat as those two, but decent enough hitter. And given the park and the homer problems of Beck, I think he's an interesting one. So there's a chance we could see some runs in this one, even though both lineups are pretty mediocre, and even though I've liked Gagnon in the past, I think there's a chance we get some runs.
Really, because we're getting some comments here, like in the under potentially, going back to looking at our pitchers, because that's when I was prepping for this, I was thinking, I see Drew Gagnon, I think the under. I think Eric's a big Drew Gagnon guy. But you're saying maybe that's not going to happen as much tonight. Whenever we're kind of in this kind of dilemma here, I go back to the foreign hitters. I see, can they be a difference maker? When you think Mel Rojas Jr. in the KT Wiz, you think, yes, probably. But this Lions team, Tyler Saladino, is he tonight? I know we were talking about him just being activated just not that long ago. But, I mean, I don't know what to do right here. What is he enough to make it an over? Or is he going to be standard, 285, not get a hit tonight, and we're going to see an under?
Well, I think his numbers look a lot better if you throw out his first 2 or so weeks. I think, maybe he had some trouble adjusting, something like that. I don't remember if there was a minor injury, but he was very bad, like OPS of 400-something-ish over his first 2 or 3 weeks. But he's been quite good since. He's been everything you want out of a foreign hitter when he's healthy. He is a righty, so not necessarily an awesome play against Drew Gagnon. But Jawook Koo has actually been the team's best hitter by OPS, the right fielder who normally hits number 3. Those two are decent. They don't have a ton beyond that. So a bet on the over is a bet on Gagnon's recent form and a bet on the hitter-friendly home park. I don't hate the under either because Gagnon has been quite good in the past, and both lineups are overall pretty mediocre. But I think if you're worried about Gagnon, then the over looks good. And I think seeing what we see from Sean there with the over-under looking exactly right, that makes definitely some sense to me. I think there's a good case for either side. I would lean slightly over. That's because I'm worried about Gagnon, but anyone who has faith in Drew Gagnon isn't somebody I'm going to disagree with too strongly.
All right. I respect that. Maybe singing a different tune about Gagnon. How about on the money line here? Who do we think is going to win, Tigers or Lions?
I still think Gagnon's better than Beck, even if I'm a bit down on him, so I would side Tigers.
Tigers,
the lineups are pretty close.
And offensively, we don't know. It could go probably exactly 9.5 runs. We'll see. Crazy things have happened. Maybe they will score a half run tonight. So moving on over to now first of two former major leaguers facing off. Tyler Wilson, Adrian Sampson. 2 pretty bad teams. Maybe this pitching matchup's making it a little bit more interesting. Who do we feel has the edge here, as both ERAs are quite ugly?
Yeah, I'd be going with the Twins in this one. I recommended Wilson on my cheat sheet. He's been pretty mediocre. He pitched like an ace or a number 2 guy, at least for the last couple of years. But he's been worse, and the underlying numbers are worse. I think he might still be better than a 4.5 ERA, but it's not anything impressive. But he's facing a Giants lineup that is quite bad. They're 8th in scoring on the season. So I think he's a fine play tonight, especially because he's pretty cheap on DraftKings and FanDuel because, again, he hasn't really been that good. I think you look at the pedigree and you look at the lineup, I think he's a fine play. I also recommended the Twins bats because Adrian Sampson just hasn't really shown anything. He's stabilizing a bit. He had some very poor starts early. Of course, he had, to be fair to him, a very rough start to the year. He had to go home to be with his dad who passed away. And then, going through a quarantine right after that was obviously gives you good reason to pitch poorly early in the year, but he did pitch poorly. And he hasn't pitched a whole lot better since. Stabilizing, but not good. Doesn't walk a ton of guys, but doesn't really strike anybody out either. He's had some bad BABIP luck, but even if you take that away, he's pretty mediocre pitcher. Maybe he's better than his ERA and WHIP, but not by enough that I'd be at all scared. So it feels like the kind of game that the Twins could bounce back in. Twins have been really bad in their last 4 games. They've only scored 8 total runs, but they faced some really good pitchers in that stretch. I think they faced Raul Alcantara, Drew Richinski, and Dan Straley in 3 of those last 4 games for the Twins. So that's one way to get shut out twice in 4 games and score just 2 runs in one other game. So I think now that they've got a much easier matchup, and Roberto Ramos and Hyun-Soo Kim are starting to come alive again. They had a pretty bad stretch. So I think taking those 2 guys and maybe young Jong Lee, that was the stack I recommended on my cheat sheet. I think they all look like good plays unless you're fully behind an Adrian Sampson bounce back, which I don't think he's shown enough reason to think that that's coming.
I did want to ask about that. Sean bringing up that both these guys have been quite disappointing this year. Both not ace level, in Wilson's case, borderline ace. Samson, though, he did have the rough beginning to the season. Wilson has been proven to be successful in the past. Is there any chance we could see them now, 50 games in, start to turn things around? Or are we past that point and we don't even consider paying up for these guys when they're going on the mound?
Well, again, I did recommend Wilson today, but he's down in that tier of only if the matchup's good. Early in the year, he's somebody I was interested in most of the time based on his numbers from previous seasons. But when the matchup's good, I like him, and the matchup is good tonight. So I think whether you side over or under basically comes down to how much faith you have in Wilson. I think even the bad version of Wilson is better than the Giants lineup. So I think he might do enough to hit the under. I think the Twins should score quite a few runs. I think they'll bounce back. I think Samson's really struggled. So I think the Twins could do enough to do most of the work on the over on their own. And if you don't have faith in Wilson to have at least a quality start, but maybe, a seven inning, 2-run kind of deal. If you don't have faith in Wilson to do that against the Giants, the over makes some sense to me.
So what are you taking? Are you officially taking the over?
I'm going to take the under because I did recommend Wilson today, and I think he is going to be good enough because I don't have much faith in the Giants. But I don't think I'm particularly strong on the under there.
So another game where we're really pitcher dependent here. What version of the guy are you going to get? I would think I would lean towards, the Twins here on the pick because he is facing a Giants team that, has historically this year not been a big offensive team, especially when you look at their foreign player, Dixon Machado, batting so low in the order and being so defensive-minded first. But we'll see. We'll see. Wilson has not been ace level, and the Giants could very well explode. So we'll have to see there. What is your pick? Twins, Giants? You had to pick.
I picked Twins. One last thing on Wilson versus the Giants. The Giants are extremely right-handed. They only have one guy, Asap San, who hits anywhere near the top of the order. I think you're zoomed in enough that some of them don't have any hands, but it's a lot of R's, what you can't see right now. So I think that helps Wilson too.
I like that. Righty on righty, and we'll see how that plays. Should be enough of a sample size. So Wilson going tonight against the Giants. Let's move over to another matchup with two international players. Ricardo Pinto taking on Raul Alcantara. Talked about Alcantara early with the power rankings. When he's going, this Bears team looks like they are firing on all cylinders and a great ERA. What are we thinking tonight? Are we just going all Bears here? Is this an easy one?
Yeah, they're very much all Bears. Alcantara looks good. All you need to look at is that ERA, and he's good. But he's been even better than that lately. He started the season kind of mediocre, but over his last 4 starts, he has an ERA of 1.53 and a WHIP of 0.65. I think he's only walked a single batter over those last 4. He's been absolutely dominant, and the Wyverns can't really hit at all, so I think he's going to have a very easy time. He's my best play by far tonight. We can get to Eric Jokic later, who's probably a better pitcher, but he's facing the Dinos, so I think that makes Alcantara the best play. And on FanDuel, he's, for whatever reason, the cheapest pitcher by like a large margin. This happens with them sometimes because they go with team starting pitcher rather than individual starting pitcher. And if they put the contest up before they know who's starting, sometimes you get wildly out of line prices, and that's Alcantara tonight. So if anyone listening plays FanDuel, I would jump all over that unless you're afraid of everybody else doing the same. But yeah, he's been better than his already good ERA over his last few starts. Yeah, look at that. Just 1 walk, 27 strikeouts over his last 4 starts, going 7 or more innings every time. He's pitching as well as Jokic and Koo lately. He's probably been better than them lately, so I would be all about him.
Yeah, that's quite impressive when we actually look at the numbers here on rotowire.com, of course. Because for most of the other games, he was kind of getting by on that Bears great offensive a little bit. Do we move him into the category now, after looking at his last 4 or 5 starts, that he is a ace that we could go to every single night? Or are we still not sure about him, considering he has had some worse starts?
Less sure than the Jokic and Koo level, but he only has to do this for a few more. I mean, the season's not that old. We're coming up to him, being that good for half his starts if he just makes a couple more. So this is his second year in the KBO. He was with the Wiz last year and was more good than great. I think ERA of 4-ish, nothing too impressive. But he's also one of the younger foreign starters. I think he's 27, so it's possible he's adding something. But basically, the way he's playing right now, there's nobody else like him, or very few pitchers like him, and he's facing the second worst lineup in the league. So not much doubt here.
Yeah, I think that's what you got to go with. You got a comment here joking about Pinto here. I thought, if there's any chance the Bears might be able to struggle a little bit against the Wyverns, you would think it would be against one of their better pitchers. But, I mean, look at this differential in wins between these two teams.
Yeah.
Is this basically a lock on the Bears and the over for them to really beat up on Pinto and him to be gone by the fifth inning?
Yeah, Pinto is a little bit weird. His strikeout and walk numbers are both really bad. 12.7% strikeout rate. That's like 5 percentage points below average. 11.1% walk rate's about 3% above. So if you just look at those two, you'd think he'd be one of the worst starters in the league, but he has a passable ERA, and that's mostly because he hasn't given up homers. I think he's only given up 2 all year. That kind of thing tends to have a decent amount of randomness in it, a lot more than strikeouts and walks. Strikeouts and walks are very much under a pitcher's control. Obviously, the hitter has a lot to do with it too, but those are the things that pitchers control the most. That's why I talk about them so often, especially early in the year. If you're a strikeout pitcher, you're going to get your strikeouts because your stuff's really good. But something like a homer, a pitcher isn't a whole lot worse if he gives up a warning track fly ball versus a home run. Or I guess if he gives up a home run, that's not a whole lot worse from just how good was the pitch perspective. So homers tend to have a lot more luck involved. Not necessarily quite as much luck as grounders getting through the hole and that kind of thing. But when you see a guy who's walking everybody, striking out no one, but also not giving up homers, you got to figure the homers are probably going to come soon, and then it's all going to fall apart. So I don't think we should treat Pinto like he's anywhere near his decent ERA. I think he's somebody I'd be interested in stacking against. Bears didn't quite make one of my top 2 stacks this time because there was just a couple better ones, but the Bears' top left-handed hitters, they got that middle of the order with Jose Fernandez, Jael, Jaewon Kim, among the best stretches in the league, and they're all lefties. So I would be very happy to run those guys out against Pinto tonight. If you're talking over-under, it's going to be how much do you think the Bears are going to score, basically. I can't see Alcantara giving up more than about 2. So it all comes down to, can you think the Bears get that much? I mean, Pinto, for whatever reason, he's been able to keep the run totals down in most of his starts, which maybe hints at the under here, especially given that we're at the most pitcher-friendly park in the league, James Hill Baseball Stadium, which is not as easy to remember as Daegu Samsung Lions Park. But that could help hit the under. But I think, like Sean's saying there, I think the Bears are going to be good enough that they might basically hit the over by themselves. I really don't think Pinto is any good, so I think they'll have a chance to do it.
Yeah, looking at the Bears' last couple of games, they can put up runs. You see a 10 spot here, 7 in their last game against the Wyverns in game 1. And for how much you're trashing Pinto, you would really expect for him to give up a lot more runs. And you'd have to think the home runs are coming, especially now as he's facing a very potent Bears lineup. We got a comment here that we're liking basically everything, every aspect. Here it is. Barry talking about every aspect of the Bears tonight. A lock. I'll just go ahead and circle them right now. Deuce and Bears taking that. And how much do you agree with the sentiment tonight that they could very well just score 12 runs on their own, that they can hit the over by themselves? Are you confident in that over against a pretty actually underlying disappointing numbers from Pinto?
Yeah, again, the only reason not to become confident in it is that Pinto keeps skating by. Again, maybe he's one of those guys with the secret sauce to get by with bad peripherals. Maybe there's a reason why hitters don't take his bad pitches over the fence, but I don't think at 11, 12 starts, there's enough reason to conclude that. So I would expect him to fall back to his peripherals pretty hard.
Yeah, just what you're going to have to be looking at, what he's been doing recently. You got to default to that. Maybe something happens. We'll have to see. We're getting some other comments in case you're just tuning in, some new people commenting in. I see Juan here asking about the Lions. We did talk about them already, but Eric, you want to give Juan just a quick little 30-second recap of what you said about this Tigers and Lions matchup for anyone that's just joining us?
Yeah, both lineups are equally mediocre. Drew Gagnon was very good early, has been kind of mediocre lately, which could be reason to side with the Lions, though Jung Hyun Baek has been pretty poor, pretty reliably, so I think the smarter play is the Tigers, but if you are if you're buying into Gagnon's slump, it's been a pretty serious, he hasn't been terrible, but he's been gone from very good to very mediocre. So it's closer than you might expect given Gagnon's full season numbers.
Gagnon, a guy we were high on, maybe not as much tonight. Hope that helped answer your questions, Juan and Coach. Now moving to a fresh game, probably the best game. You wouldn't get a better matchup than the Dinos and the Heroes facing off. Game 2, Eric Jokic, the Joker, facing off against the Dinos in that very powerful lineup. Man, I don't know which way to lean here. This is going to be an interesting one. I want to see, Eric, how are you going to break this one down here? Great pitching versus an even better offense.
Yeah, it's a huge series. Best one so far. I mean, I guess we say that every time we see the top two teams, whoever they are at the moment, but it's right now. So these two is the best series so far. And the Heroes were lucky enough to get their top two pitchers going in it. They won with Jake Brigham coming back from that elbow injury in game 1. And Eric Jokic has been as good as anybody. The only guy with a claim to be as good as him this year is Cheng Mo Koo, really. So Jokic, actually, I recommended him on the cheat sheet despite his very high price. He's the only time I could remember recommending anybody against the Dinos. He's just been that good. He's been that consistent. Nobody has scored more than 3 earned runs off of him, and he's only given up 3 earned runs once. It just does not get much more consistent than that. I did note he hasn't faced either the Dinos or the Bears, so that's definitely part of why he's been so dominant. But if you look at his numbers against the other top 5 lineups, he obviously hasn't pitched against his own Heroes lineup, but he's faced the Wiz twice and the Twins once, who round out the top 5. And he's given up 0 runs against those 3. So he's handled good lineups just fine in the past. Obviously, Dinos are challenged like nobody else, though they're without Sungbum Na right now. Had a minor issue with his hand. It doesn't sound like he'll be out long, but he did hit the injured list. The KBO, the injured list is new, and they can actually come back from it before the 10 days. So I'm not exactly sure the specifics. So we could see Na back, but without him, they're decidedly worse, and Jokic hasn't had trouble with anybody. So I think there's reason to have faith in him here. It's not a comfortable recommendation to recommend anybody against the Dinos, and on fantasy sites, he's very expensive. So if it goes wrong, your lineup's completely shot. But it's really hard to argue with what he's done. I mean, it's just so consistent. Not huge strikeout upside is the one thing with him. He's barely above average there, so that does mean you're not necessarily looking at the huge point totals from a DFS perspective, but the consistency is just unparalleled.
Yeah, when you said that he's only given up 3 runs, that is once ever this season. I mean, not even a bad opening day start or second start, little slump, okay, 7 runs. Nope, that is the entire season. He has not had a start that has been 4 runs, 5 runs. It's just been 3 at the very most. Otherwise, 0, 1, or 2. And you did mention he hasn't faced either the Bears and the Dinos, which maybe is a little concerning. But, the Wiz, you talked about them being a top 5 team, and he kind of dominated them, not the last time, but the first time he did face them. So there is reason for optimism. Barry's asking here about the first 5. I'd have to think he'd be solid because he's out there and would dominate through the first 5 innings. Am I correct by saying that?
Yeah, and again, I mean, the Dinos can score on anyone, but I think you got to side with the dominant pitcher here. I would definitely think the Heroes have the advantage in this game because the Dinos are tossing Sung Young Choi, who, again, they've had real trouble at the back of their rotation. Jong Lee, their number 4 guy, has been struggling. He lost last night, this morning's game, whatever you want to call it. But they just haven't found anybody good in the 5 spot. Choi doesn't have a ton of innings this year, and he's only struck out 1 more than he's walked. He's given up more than 2 homers per 9 innings. Basically bad in everything. Again, very limited action, but no reason to have any faith in him. And the Heroes have a strong lineup, so I think they should score quite a few off him. They were one of my stack recommendations tonight. I would load up on their right-handed hitters at the top of the order. Ha-Sung Kim, Young-Ho Park, Dongwon Park, all of those guys. They're righties who hit in the top 5, sometimes 6. Could even be fine with Jong Lee, even though he hits left-handed. He's just that good. So I would be a fan of the Heroes' right-handed hitters here, and I'm a fan of Jokic even against the Dinos.
Yeah, I mean, it's another situation where we have, a great pitcher going up against not a great lineup, but a solid lineup, like we're seeing with, I guess not exactly the same as the Deucin situation, but I think, how do we feel about this over there? I'm saying it in the same situation where we have an elite pitcher, and it's basically going to have to be up to the Heroes to hit that over if we are confident in that 9.5. Or is that maybe a different situation because the Dinos can be dominant all the time against anyone?
Right. If Jokic is who he normally is, then the Heroes will have to hit most of that over themselves. The Dinos have a pretty bad bullpen too, so the Heroes could well knock out Choi early with 4 or 5 runs in 3 innings, then get 6 more against the bullpen. That's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. It's hard to bet an over when Jokic is involved, but I think there's 2 ways to hit the over, right? One is the Heroes do what you think they should do against the Dinos, and the Dinos score a few runs. And the other is the Dinos actually do have a good game against Jokic for Jokic's first bad start of the year. And if there's anyone for him to have a bad start against, it would be the Dinos. So it's definitely possible to see them hit the over. But I think my default expectation is nobody scoring more than about 2 runs on Jokic. So you have to be predicting, 7, 8, whatever it is for the Dinos if you're going to bet over.
Yeah, a lot of different options on games tonight. We'll really see maybe some true colors come out. Is Jokic going to be the best player in the league? Is he going to pull a Josh Lindblom, win MVP? And if he's going to do that, he's going to have to perform against a top team. And he has an opportunity to do that tonight against the Dinos. We're getting a question here. Eric, not spelled correctly, of course. It's okay. But what do we think about Kiwoom's pen? Best 2 guys pitched an inning each last night. Will they go back-to-back if needed?
I would think back-to-back on 2 days should be fine. I'm trying to remember if they were one of the teams that did get a game in on Monday when we had those rescheduled games. I don't remember off the top of my head whether or not they were. But if they only pitched last night, I wouldn't be too worried about them pitching again tonight. And I doubt they're going to be called on much if Jokic is at all close to what he should be.
Yeah, Jokic is going to be maybe going the entire game tonight. If he is on, I would not put that past him. So we'll have to see what form we do get of him.
And I was wrong. They did actually play on Monday, and they gave up 13 runs and had the bullpen pitch 7 innings. But if they were down 13-3, I highly doubt that their top pitchers were pitching much in that one. So anytime a reliever is only used 1 night in a row, I think you're fine to see them come back.
So we're looking at Jokic tonight. I think you're still going to have to rely on him. I think if they get to the bullpen, you'd have to give the Dinos the edge. I mean, if they get to the bullpen early, you're like, Jokic didn't do his job, and this is most likely going to be a Dinos victory. Probably not going to be a slugfest on the Dino side if Jokic does his job. Finally, always saving the best for last. We're already coming up on time here, but we'll see how much more the fans want to talk about our favorite NY Eagles on the road taking on the KT Wiz. Eric, the Wiz are going for that, maybe the top 3 slot, trying to threaten the Bears and Heroes. And this looks like an easy series here. Save it for last for a reason, but is this the easiest pick, even easier than the Bears against the Wyverns?
No, only because Min-Soo Kim for the Wiz is also bad. Again, the Wiz, they are an adventure. They've had a bad bullpen most of the year, and they've had a bad back of their rotation too. Kim, I think, deserves every bit of that or most of that very high ERA. Doesn't walk people, but doesn't strike anybody out. So if the Eagles had any hitters I trusted, they would have been one of my staff recommendations tonight. They don't. So I didn't, and I don't necessarily feel confident in picking them, even against Min-Soo Kim, because, again, somebody's got to score runs, and I'm not sure who's going to do it. But if you find any cheap Eagles on fantasy contests, I wouldn't mind plugging any of their top 4 or so in. I actually recommended their cleanup hitter, Jin-Hang Choi. He's been hot lately over his last 9 or so games. He's been swinging a hot bat. And with how bad Min-Soo Kim is, it's worth maybe throwing a dart on a couple Eagles at the top. But the Eagles have shaky pitcher as well going tonight, Bum-Soo Kim. He's got his ERA under 4, but it's not over a huge sample size. He's got slightly above average strikeout rate, but walks everybody. He's somebody I think I recommended once or twice on the cheat sheet as a very cheap option due to his strikeout rate, but I would stay away from him tonight given how good the Wiz's best bats are. I don't think he's going to hold them down and give them a chance for a win, so I think I still pick the Wiz on this one. Mel Rojas, Becco Gong, Jae-Gun Huang. Huang was a guy I recommended on tonight's cheat sheet, mostly just because I don't want to recommend Mel Rojas every single night. I think that would get a bit boring. No reason for you to come to the website if you just know that it's the Mel Rojas column, but it could basically be the Mel Rojas column given how hot he's been. Leads in more or less everything. I think the Wiz are one of those they could I think this is going to be a very high-scoring game. I think the Wiz shouldn't have any problems with Bum-Soo Kim of the Eagles, and if the Eagles are ever going to score runs, it's going to be against a guy like Min-Soo Kim of the Wiz. So definitely, I don't know what the over is, but it's too low.
Yeah, I like that. We're taking the over easily. We're writing the word over not even on the team profiles, just on the player, because this Mel Rojas Jr. deserves a column by himself. He's MVP candidate each and every night for the entire season, just night after night producing, a near 400 average. I mean, this is a guy that maybe came on a little late, maybe not right away in the beginning of the season. That belonged more to Jose Miguel Fernandez, but Rojas doing his job. But going back to what you said, Eric, I can't believe you did it. You finally did it. You recommended an Eagles player for a fantasy lineup. I don't know how many days that's been since that's happened. Jed Hoying, I mean, he was cut a while ago. So it's been a couple of days. Is Choi someone that could potentially continue this hot streak and be someone that you target on this Eagles team? Or is this really more of a short-term type thing?
Yeah, not all that excited. He's old and didn't do much the last couple of years playing the part-time role. He has some good seasons earlier in his career. But the recommendation for him was mostly Min-Soo Kim is very bad. Jin-Hang Choi is the absolute minimum price on FanDuel, and anytime you can get a guy for the absolute minimum, he's effectively free. So you can occasionally, if the Eagles are playing somebody very bad, throwing in one of their guys is interesting. I think I recommended one or so last week. They're showing up a little bit more than in the depths of their 18-game losing streak, but there's not a whole lot there.
That's fair, especially when you look at the guys' 2020 projections. Don't put too much stock in that, but a zero batting average maybe isn't what you want, even at a free, at an affordable salary.
I don't think he played enough last year for us to even bother projecting him. I think that's what that is.
Not a good sign. Not a good sign. And Barry here dropping some good stats for us. KT averaging over 7 runs per game against lefties, not named Jokic and Chang Mo. So
nice, good one.
Easy over. Hey, the great thing is rotowire.com. Promote it, of course, but we have the research if you do all that great stat research. One of the best. And that's just about it. So, I guess I don't really have to ask this, but we're taking the over. And then, Eric, who do we think is going to win tonight?
Yeah, that would be the Wiz.
Easy peasy. Mel Rojas Jr. should snag the win yet again. What he's been doing has been incredible. Let's see. Wrapping up here as we move into some injury notes to wrap up today's show.
That's a fun question there. What
Kevin
two players are going to homer?
Yeah, what do we think here?
Mel Rojas, as always. He's very close to a homer every other game for his last 30-plus games. It's basically always him. Given that he's facing a weak pitcher, that's up there too. I'd go with Byung-Ho Park for the Heroes as number 2. He's tied for second in the league with 16 homers. Has been quite hot lately, and he'll get the platoon advantage against a weak lefty, so he'd be my number 2, Byung-Ho Park.
There we go. Home runs, of course, count for something in fantasy, so maybe look for those guys to build around. Any injury notes, anything to avoid? Chad Bell, non-factor, wasn't going to pitch. Not going to even pitch. Anything in terms of injury notes that are notable?
Yeah, two most relevant ones. Sungbum Na on the injured list. Dino's their best hitter, left-handed slugger. He's got some sort of minor hand thing. Doesn't sound like it's being talked about as if it's serious, but obviously can't start him unless we know for sure he's playing. I wouldn't start him anyway against Eric Jokic, but something to keep in mind for the next couple of days. The Dinos are definitely worse without him, but they're still incredibly deep. So he's out, and then Jawook Koo coming back for the Lions. He's the Lions' best hitter. He's their best left-handed hitter too. So he gives them, if you want to add just one lefty against a shaky righty, which probably doesn't describe Drew Gagnon, but might describe Drew Gagnon. Koo is somebody who's back in the mix after a brief absence with a thumb issue.
Yes, you can see here we have all the injury notes that you need for all your favorite teams here on our KBO News tab right here. News. Click on that, and we even have some just latest what's going on and some good player notes as well. I think that's just about it.
Good shout out there. Ji-Won Na, he's in my cheat sheet tonight, and Jung Hyung Baek is a lefty who hasn't been good lately, so that's a good shout too.
Shout out to a Tigers player, hopefully riding to a victory behind Drew Gagnon, who we're not maybe excited about tonight, but historically we have been. So we'll have to see which Gagnon we get tonight. And that seems to be the theme throughout all our games. Which versions of these guys are we going to get? Yep. Wilson, Jokic, the two headliners, and Mel Rojas Jr., not a pitcher, but basically is that level of power for the Wiz, and Alcantara for the Bears, looking like easier picks tonight. That is just about it. Eric, anything else to tell the fans at home?
No, thanks for everybody finding us on this unusual time. Thanks for sticking out for a longer than normal show for everybody who stuck around. Hope it was worth your time. We are going to go back to Monday and Thursday, 10 p.m. 10 p.m. Eastern is our new time due to your duties at a ballpark, which is a good reason to mix things around. So yeah, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. in Sam time. Every Monday and Thursday should be stable-ish going forward, but we'll try to let you guys know if anything changes. But yeah, thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah, thanks. Really appreciate it. You can follow along at RotoWire KBO for all our updates. Follow Eric at Eric_Halterman. Sean, thank you. Barry, thank you. Kevin, see you on Thursday, and have a good night, everyone. Really appreciate it. Peace out.